Hey, it's Sam, and here's Matt. Pull up a chair, let's have a chat. Sobering thoughts, we're peeling it back. Two minds on the mend, truth we can't pretend. Laughs and lessons will blend. Recovery's a ride, no map, no guide. But here we stand, side by side. Sobering thoughts, let's talk it through. Finding the light in what we do. A journey shared, it's me and you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sobering Thoughts of Recovery. I'm Matt.
I'm Sam. So today we're diving into something real that so many people in addiction and recovery, what we really hear about stories of anxiety, panic attacks, psychosis. So basically, we're going to talk about mental health, how that impacts our addiction, how that impacts our recovery. So
Sam, I just want to start with you. When we talk about mental health, especially anxiety, what do you see in recovery spaces? How common is it for people struggling with AOD to also be fighting, panic attacks as well?
a lot of the questions that get asked, or I ask myself, is what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the mental health issues? Is it addiction issues? I remember, as I said in our first episode, that I was diagnosed with ADHD. I also had anxiety and depression. And for me, that was quite scary. I remember I was 21 years old. I was singing in a band. We used to do the Sydney circuits. And I remember sitting in the music meeting that we had one night, and this, very hard to describe, but it was this doom. This doom overcome me, and I remember
Like a sense of doom, like the world's kind of imploding kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that I was just sitting there and actually felt like someone gave me LSD. So it felt so it felt unreal, if that's a word. Unreal. It just did not feel
You've said
real.
it. It's got to be unreal.
Uh,
So, I mean, like anxiety and substances are like cousins. They always show up together.
They do. And you know what? I remember that I just didn't know what was happening. And I was so unwell probably for about 10 years after. When I first experienced my first panic attack, it was so scary. I didn't know if I was going to die. And picking up anything like a Panadol, I wouldn't do because I was so scared to pick up a Panadol that I was going to die. That's how severe my panic disorder was, my anxiety disorder.
Yeah, that sounds incredible.
Mm.
Yeah. Look, I've seen that too. Panic attacks are terrifying, even on their own. Your heart's racing, you're short of breath, you're feeling like you're about to die. Now, imagine stacking alcohol or amphetamines on top of that. The body just goes into total chaos. So, why do you think so many people turn to substances even though it makes it worse?
I think in our little heads, Matt,
Mhm.
it's that excuse. I'm feeling anxious, so I'm going to go and use something to try to alleviate that.
Yeah, it feels like it helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in real life, it actually makes it worse.
Yeah. And like, but in ways it works, like we're just not understanding the effect that it's having. I mean, when we look at alcohol as as the substance itself, it's a depressant on our nervous system. So if we have depression, it's gonna bring us down.
100%. And it's like that, you know, someone that drinks alcohol, they say, I'm going to have a drink because I'm feeling anxious. But, by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, this person is still drinking, but
Yeah.
not drinking because they're anxious, drinking because now it's turned into a substance use abuse.
That's right. I mean, as I said, because at the moment it helps, alcohol numbs where amphetamines distract.
Mm.
You know, so when we think like that, it's basically a band-aid on a volcano, right? And it's such a vicious cycle. People drink to calm anxiety, the anxiety rebounds, right? So then they drink more. Same with stimulants. Take them to fight depression and then crash into a worse depression later. Have you seen a spiral in people that we've supported before?
All the time. And what makes it harder is the guilt. People think, why can't I cope like everyone else? That shame fuels both that panic and the drinking or using. It's a trap, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's what addiction is, really, isn't it? If we think of it, addiction is that trap, that cycle. I use amphetamines because I feel unhappy. I feel like crap. It makes me feel better. But then the come down, I'm feeling crappy. I'm feeling shitty again. And then bang, I use again. I feel so. It's the end of the cycle. It's that carousel that you're just not getting off. So let's just talk about just some support now. So years ago, if you had panic attacks or addiction, the attitude was toughen up, spoonful of cement, all right? Or worse, you just hide it. But today, we're seeing more options. What do you think has changed in how we manage anxiety and AOD together today in 2025, Sam?
Yeah, so it used to be very silent. I remember in my own life journey, I remember going to a doctor and saying that I was experiencing panic attacks, and it wasn't really talked about very often back then in those days. We've got dual diagnosis programs that treat both mental health sides and the addiction side. People can learn coping tools, breathing exercises, mindfulness, support groups, and even medication when needed.
I mean, some of the medication's been great. I mean, if we look at alcohol, we have Campril and Antabuse, even treating methamphetamine use. We've got naloxone and Buvidol now, even though Buvidol is typically used for opioid addiction.
So if someone's listening right now and dealing with a panic attack, one of the best things you can do is name it. Say to yourself, this is a panic attack, not a heart attack. But that's very hard when you're in having an anxiety attack, saying, at the moment I'm having an anxiety attack. That's really hard to do, name that.
But you got to know that it's going to pass.
But it's very hard when you're dealing, having
definitely.
that.
Yeah, definitely. Look, reaching out you don't have to do it alone. Whether it's a mate, a sponsor, a counsellor, or even a helpline, having that support is a game changer.
So if anxiety's been tagging along with your recovery or fueling your drinking or using, you're not broken. You're human and support is out there.
Exactly. Panic attacks can feel like the end of the world, but they're actually your body screaming for care. And today we've got so many more ways to answer that scream than just pouring another drink. Us as humans, we try and find that quick fix without reaching out for that support. And it's sometimes that quick fix is not helping us, in the long term. It's a short-term fix.
And talking about benzos also, I know that, a lot of doctors aren't prescribing any benzos for people these days because people are simply getting addicted to drugs like Valium, Xanax. I remember being prescribed Xanax myself, and I remember taking 8 tablets, 2 milligrams at once.
Wow.
That's how high my tolerance was. And in fact, it was sort of making making my anxiety worse. When I didn't have that medication, I was, going into withdrawal. And that for myself was a very difficult time, is getting off those benzos as well, without sort of really focusing what was driving my anxiety, what was driving my panic disorder. Instead of, going to a psychologist and talking about what was going on for me, my GP was simply just putting a Band-Aid effect on it. What about for you, Matt? What did you, we have ever experienced anxiety, panic disorder?
Well, it's funny you say that because I am relatively new to anxiety. I have been diagnosed with anxiety disorder over the last month. I was in complete denial of it for a long time. And, I've been having panic attacks now since 2019. They were pretty far apart when they first started, and now they're close together. And I had my first psychologist appointment yesterday, so I really enjoyed that. I think definitely going back again to try and just work some stuff out and why is my nervous system, why is my body reacting, to this stimulus? Because for me, my anxiety isn't thought. I'm not worried about the future or worrying about what's going to happen. I'm not catastrophizing things. It's a body anxiety.
So what do you think you're anxious about, Matt? What do you think is driving your anxiety?
Look, I've had some serious jobs in the past, which I'd seen some pretty bad things. I spoke about that yesterday. I'm being quite open here on the podcast, and maybe that has driven
It's
my
finally
my
caught
anxiety.
up on you.
Well, maybe it has. I definitely don't know. We touched on it yesterday. My psychologist, she asked maybe if I had PTSD. Do I think about
PTSD, yeah.
And do I think about these events? And I said, well, no, not usually. I'm thinking about them now because we're talking about them, but I don't usually do that because, funnily enough, when we finished working as a team that would have experienced these things, we'd go and have a beer, or and we'd go and talk about these things. Oh, what a rough day over a couple of beers. And then we found that when we got a group of us together, all we did was talk about work and drink and kind of hash these problems out, or these what had happened over the course of this time. So to say that I was having memories of these episodes, like these situations or events, no, I can't say I can, but my body seems to be reacting to it.
Did you find any stigma around, or for yourself, finding that, I've got to see a psychologist? What are people going to think? What was that experience like for you?
I was in complete denial. I'll tell you that now. Oh, I don't have an anxiety disorder. You're kidding me. That's absolute nonsense. I was in denial for a good, when it was first mentioned to me by a previous manager of mine, I said, no, it's got to be organic. There's definitely something wrong with me. I don't think like that.
But that's how we think, though. We think something is wrong. We think that we're having a heart attack. We don't sort of really put it down to being like an anxiety disorder. We quite often think that it is something organic that's happening with our body.
Yeah, and I went through many like blood tests and MRIs and things like that, and it all came back, negative. My local doctor said, "Oh, you've got white coat syndrome. You're a hypochondriac."
Wow, what was that like for you hearing those?
Really frustrating, because I still felt like that I there was something wrong. Like as you described, earlier. It felt like I was in constant doom mode, like the world was going to end.
Yeah,
and
it's very scary.
It's very scary. My palms were always sweaty. My feet were sweaty. I felt on edge constantly. And the doctor prescribed me a medication just to go, oh, this will keep your heart rate down for a minute. This would be fine. But it didn't fix the feeling of being on edge and being that, hey, look, I'm going to, something's going to happen. I feel like I'm going to die.
And what about back in your using days? If you look back, can you think whether you were experiencing anxiety? Do you think, that what come first, the chicken or the egg? Did you think that, you had an anxiety disorder back then, or do you think now you're at a certain age and you've developed some sort of anxiety disorder, looking back, what comes up for you?
As I mentioned in like our first podcast, like I was like an immature 19-year-old and needed that parental supervision. Um, and basically, I think it came more about after this certain job that I did. Basically the events that I saw there were quite traumatic. And I'd been in a lot of situations where um, most people wouldn't want themselves to be in. So, as I said earlier, that you think you handle the problem by talking it out with peers and colleagues after work over a couple of beers, but clearly it stays with you, in the body.
100%. And do you think that maybe that you have been triggered by anything lately that could have triggered your PTSD from your last role?
Not that I'm aware of, and that's the biggest problem for me and my anxiety is I don't feel that it's triggered by anything specifically because it just comes on so suddenly. The attack. People talk about it's anxiety is about the worry, where worry about the future, where depression is thinking about the past.
Yep.
Right? And I can and cannot agree with that at the same time
Yeah.
because I don't feel like I worry about what's going to happen.
And that's a normal thing that a lot of doctors and psychologists will ask you is what's going on for you, what's triggered that anxious feeling for you. And sometimes you just don't know, do you? Like this could be coming back from maybe your childhood. You just don't know where your anxiety is getting triggered from. Like if I asked you, if you had a panic attack, say yesterday, what triggered that? I bet you wouldn't be able to answer that.
For sure, wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be able to tell you. My last panic attack was a couple of weeks ago. I woke up from a very violent dream because I was taking melatonin prescribed by a doctor. I woke up, heart was racing, palms were sweating, feet were sweating. It was a panic attack, and the only thing that made me think this is a panic attack is because I was sweating. And so I just used deep breathing, and after a while I calmed down. My palms and my feet were still sweating, but I knew it was a panic attack because of this nightmare that I was having. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
100%. I don't experience anxiety or panic disorder much now than what I did when I was growing up, when I was in my 20s or 30s. It was quite prominent back then. But I do find myself quite anxious sometimes, but I don't know exactly what's triggering that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of hard to navigate. It's hard to navigate where your anxiety is coming from. I know for me, if I'm going through something that could be life changing, I may not experience anxiety as such, but I have the after effects of anxiety where I'll get heart palpitations. But I'm probably a lot better these days than what I was in my 20s.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, for me, I'm the same way. There's nothing that I can put my finger on that would say, hey, look, you're going to have an anxiety attack. It's a feeling that comes over. Like I start feeling the adrenaline, and then my heart rates will come up, and then all of a sudden I'll start shaking, and then this might last anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, right? And then it goes away, but that adrenaline rush has left me shaking like a leaf. Right? So it's not something I can put a finger on.
Yeah.
Or people say to me, what were you thinking about at the time? I was thinking about nothing.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I've woken up in a panic attack. Sometimes I've woken up and sat on the lounge and it was 8 o'clock in the morning and had a panic attack.
Can I ask you a question? What about your parents? Do they live with any mental health issues that you could say that could be, coming from your parents?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I know of at all. And and they say that these things can be handed down through generations. Yet I can say that no, both my parents are quite mentally stable people. I think other people might not. I have heard
Mm.
my mother is mad as a cut snake, but that's a different story. But yeah, I really can't put a finger on. Hey, yeah, my parents have mental health issues.
And I suppose for me, I can't really figure out, if it was coming from my parents. I do know that my aunties and uncles, I do or have heard that they live with an anxiety disorder. Whether it's coming from them, I don't know. But I know from my daughter, who currently is experiencing quite severe anxiety and panic disorder.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So let's just talk a little bit more about anxiety and what we know about it. Now, anxiety is when your body's in fight or flight mode, right? And if we remember, there's for our listeners, there's fight, there's flight, there's fawn, and then there's freeze as well, and how our body reacts to those things. Now, if we're always in flight mode, in that anxiety, I need to flee. Imagine what our nervous system is doing.
Mm.
It's just in overload constantly. Wants to constantly flee the situation, and we're living on that edge constantly. So the comorbidity of having an anxiety disorder and treating that with, say, cannabis or alcohol is a common thing that I think both Sam and I see in our line of work. What about you, Sam? Do you
100%.
agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. And a lot of the time, I think, people say that they continue to use is because when they stop using, their anxiety, their mental health deteriorates. But when they are using, they think it's getting better. But in fact, it's enhancing your mental health issues.
That's right. It's the crash that comes down after the fact. Like as I said before, it's an endless cycle. If my substance is alcohol and I'm feeling anxious and I drink alcohol to level myself out and calm down, the next day in the hangover, I'm going to have anxiety.
And I do hear a lot of stories too, coming from people that I, have worked with in my past, is that their anxiety does get better more time that they have sobriety. So, whether it's an excuse to keep using drugs and alcohol or whether it's, I'm unsure. But
We're not we're just not relying on the substance to level us out anymore. That's what it is. Like in my usage, I would use amphetamines like a cup of coffee. And I would feel so horrible in the morning that I would drive to my dealer's house. Let's call her Janet. And I knew that Janet's door would open up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be there waiting, and all of 60 kilos of me, and I'd be knocking on the door, and she'd open up, and she was a little old lady, and she'd offer me in. Oh, Matt, look at you, you're all skin and bone. And she'd offer me a jam on toast and get me a cup of tea. And then she'd say to me, how much speed do you want? And I'd say, I'll have a bag, thanks. And then
but
go.
what if Janet wasn't home? What would happen to you then?
Oh, one of her sons would help me. That's just how it was. It was always Volvo on tap.
Mm.
Right? So, it was building the relationship with the drug. It wasn't, and as I said, I was a 19-year-old that needed that parental guidance. I found that parental figure in a woman who was giving me drugs.
Do you think that you numbed your feelings when you're using drugs and alcohol? Like, did you think that maybe you were quite anxious and you used drugs to numb your anxiety?
I think maybe being alone for the first time, having a sister that she lived in Parramatta at the time, and I was in Glendenning, so not too far away, but my parents were on the South Coast. So being alone for the first time
Mm.
really probably drove that, because the social impact of using with other people, that kept me, I wasn't alone then.
Yeah.
The anxiety wasn't there because I knew that, hey, look, I could use it with these people, they could use it with me. I've got friends, and
Well, and I suppose for listeners that don't, use any substance and they experience anxiety, that's quite common too. Not everyone that, uses substance experience anxiety. We probably have listeners out there that are substance free experiencing anxiety.
please, if you do, look, definitely, if you experience anxiety and are substance free, please leave us a comment, and we can definitely talk about it in our next podcast. So what we covered today is just how drugs and alcohol can impact not just anxiety, but depression, and how it exacerbates both of those things in such a way that, is a driving force to keep using. As I said, that merry-go-round, that carousel of dependence that we kind of find ourselves in addiction. And when we want to try and get off, that's when that depression and that anxiety can even exacerbate even more. Right? So we urge our listeners, and we urge the people that are in addiction to please reach out, find yourself support, go online, speak to your GPs, speak to a counsellor, speak to some professional that will be able to help you, and try and not define what anxiety and depression is, but try and take the stigma away from yourself as well at the same time. Sam, what do you think?
I think that's really great, Matt. I think, reach out to family members, reach out to friends, Google. There's so much out there for you to get some help.
Yeah, definitely, Sam. So we're going to finish it up there, guys. Please leave any comments if you'd like. We'd love to hear from the listeners. And once again, please follow. It helps us a lot. This is goodbye from Matt.
Goodbye from Sam.
And we'll catch you next time in episode 3.
Thank you for listening to Sobering Thoughts with Sam and Matt. Please leave a like or subscribe. It would help a lot. See you next time for more talk and laughter.